Every third bite of food you take today exists because of a honeybee. That apple you had for breakfast? A bee made it possible. The almonds in your cereal? Bees again. The cotton in your shirt? You guessed it, bees. Without these tiny workers, grocery stores would be empty wastelands, and humanity would face starvation within years. Most people neglect how important honeybees are in our life. Honeybees are often perceived as aggressive insects that sting unsuspecting humans. People fear them because of their painful stings, and swarms near homes can cause panic. This reputation is somewhat misguided, as honeybees are generally docile and only sting when defending their colony. However, this defensive behavior overshadows their true story. In reality, honeybees are incredibly sophisticated, highly organized creatures that are literally keeping human civilization alive. In this video, you'll learn how bees live, why they sometimes sting, how they differ from other flying insects, and why they're worth $200 billion to the global economy. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's explore.
Here's an interesting fact. Honeybees perform a dance so precise it can communicate the exact location of flowers up to 6 miles away, and other bees understand it perfectly. Honeybees belong to the species Apis mellifera and are just one of over 20,000 bee species worldwide. However, they're the most economically important because of their unique combination of traits. They live in large colonies, produce surplus honey, and are gentle enough for humans to manage. A honeybee's body is perfectly engineered for their job. They have branched hairs that attract pollen, specialized pollen baskets on their legs, and a proboscis that can reach deep into flowers. Their compound eyes can see ultraviolet patterns on flowers that are completely invisible to humans. Essentially, they see landing strips that guide them to nectar. Honeybees build their homes from one of nature's most perfect materials, beeswax. Worker bees produce this wax from special glands in their abdomen, then chew it until it reaches the perfect consistency for construction. They sculpt this wax into hexagonal cells, a shape that mathematicians have proven is the most efficient way to store the maximum amount of honey using the least amount of material. This hexagonal structure is so perfect that engineers study it to design stronger, lighter materials for airplanes and spacecraft. Unlike solitary bees, honeybees live in superorganisms called colonies that can contain up to 80,000 individuals. Each colony operates like a perfectly synchronized city, with 3 types of citizens. One queen, who can live for up to 5 years and lay 2,000 eggs per day. Hundreds of male drones, whose only job is to mate with queens from other colonies, and tens of thousands of female workers, who do everything else. These workers have different jobs based on their age. Younger bees work as nurses and wax builders inside the hive, while older bees venture outside to collect nectar and pollen.
A single bee colony can collect nectar from over 2 million flowers in a single day. Worker bees collect nectar, a sugary liquid produced by flowers, and transform it into honey through a remarkable process. They add enzymes to the nectar, then store it in their cells, where other bees fan it with their wings to evaporate excess water. The result is honey, a concentrated energy source that never spoils and can sustain the colony through winter. But bees don't just make honey. They also collect pollen, which serves as their protein source. Here's where the magic happens. When a bee lands on a flower to collect nectar, thousands of powdery pollen grains stick to her fuzzy body thanks to static electricity. When she visits the next flower of the same species, some of this pollen brushes off, allowing the plant to reproduce and create seeds. This simple transfer process, pollination, is what allows plants to produce the fruits, vegetables, and nuts we depend on for survival. Adult worker bees consume honey for quick energy during their intensive flights. They also feed honey and pollen to developing larvae, creating a cycle that sustains the entire colony. During peak season, a strong colony can consume 35 pounds of honey and 130 pounds of pollen annually.
Honeybees use their stingers exclusively for defense. They gain nothing from stinging humans or other large animals. When a worker bee stings a mammal, her barbed stinger gets lodged in the skin and tears away from her body, taking part of her digestive system with it. This means the bee dies shortly after stinging, making it the ultimate sacrifice for colony defense. This self-destructive stinging mechanism explains why honeybees are generally so docile. Since stinging means death, they only do it as a last resort when their colony is directly threatened. Most bee stings occur when people accidentally step on bees, swat at them, or come too close to a hive entrance. The sting releases alarm pheromones that alert other bees to the threat, potentially triggering more defensive behavior. Interestingly, when honeybees sting other insects or arthropods with thinner exoskeletons, they can withdraw their stinger and survive the encounter. The barbed stinger evolved specifically as a defense against thick-skinned vertebrates that pose the greatest threat to colonies. Get ready for the most important statistic in agriculture. Honeybees contribute over $200 billion to global food production every year through pollination. Worldwide, 1/3 of everything we eat depends directly or indirectly on bee pollination. Without bees, we would lose apples, almonds, blueberries, cherries, cranberries, melons, squash, cucumbers, and dozens of other crops that define modern nutrition across every continent. Commercial agriculture has become completely dependent on managed honeybee colonies worldwide, from sunflower fields in Ukraine to coffee plantations in Brazil, from rapeseed crops in Europe to fruit orchards in New Zealand. Farmers on every continent rely on honeybees for crop pollination. In fact, over 100 crop species that feed 90% of the world's population depend on bee pollination to reproduce. But honeybees do more than just pollinate crops. They support wild ecosystems by pollinating native plants that provide food and habitat for countless other species. Many wildflowers, trees, and shrubs rely on bee pollination to reproduce, creating the foundation for entire ecological communities. Modern agriculture faces a crisis called colony collapse disorder, where entire bee colonies mysteriously abandon their hives. Scientists believe this is caused by a combination of factors, including pesticides, diseases, parasites like varroa mites, and habitat loss. The decline of honeybee populations threatens global food security and has sparked urgent research into bee conservation and alternative pollinators. Honeybees are not just insects that make sweet honey. They are the invisible workforce that makes modern civilization possible, pollinating the crops that feed billions of people and maintaining the ecosystems that support all life on Earth. They represent one of nature's most successful societies, with communication systems, architecture, and social organization that rivals any human achievement. And while we sometimes fear their stings, understanding their critical role should inspire us to protect and appreciate these remarkable creatures that work tirelessly to keep our world blooming.